Appraisal. An appraiser was doing an appraisal on a subject property. He found a comparable home that had sold recently for $69,500. The comparable home was older than the subject property but had a porch that the subject property did not have. He assigned $2,000 adjustment for the comparable being older and a $1,000 adjustment for the comparable having the porch. What would be the estimate of value on the subject property? This is an example of how a market data appraisal works. We know how much the comparable sold for, so that's our starting point, $69,500. The appraiser is only looking at two items when comparing it to the subject property. First of all, it's older than the subject property. The appraiser assigned $2,000 for it being older. So if I thought about it, the fact that that comparable is older doesn't make it inferior or superior to the subject property. And since it's older, it's inferior. So since it's inferior, I'm going to add those $2,000. That brings me up to $71,500. I've also got to take into account the porch. The porch is something that the comparable has that the subject property does not have, which makes the comparable superior to the subject property. Again, we're always making modifications only to the comparable. We're trying to make the comparable as close on paper to the subject property as we can. So that $1,000 adjustment for the porch we're going to subtract out, which means that based on these two items, the subject property should be worth $70,500. That is a bare bones market data or sales comparison approach appraisal. An appraiser was using the cost approach to evaluate the depreciation of a property. He assigned $600 for roof damage, $900 for interior wear and tear, $500 for out-of-date features, and $800 because it was located next to a busy highway. If he only considered the property's physical deterioration and its external obsolescence, what was the total dollar amount he assigned to the depreciation? So let's look. He's looking at physical depreciation and external obsolescence. Well, the physical depreciation, the things that wear out, that's the $600 for the roof damage. That's also the $900 for the interior wear and tear. So if I add those two up, I'm up to $1,500. He's also looking for external obsolescence. An example of external obsolescence is the fact that it's located next to a busy highway. He gave a dollar amount to that of $800. So if I add that to my physical obsolescence, I've got a total loss in value of $2,300. Or a total depreciation of $2,300. Now notice we didn't use the $500 for the out-of-date features. That's because that's functional obsolescence, and in this problem, the appraiser was not taking that into account. If rent was $450 per month and an annual return of 12%, what was the total investment price? This is a cap rate problem. And a cap rate problem revolves around annual net income. As it relates to value, I write the annual net income as it relates to the value or price of the building because it's always going to be smaller than the total price of the building. Now the annual return or the cap rate is 12% or 0.12. I'm looking for the value or the price of my building, and I know that this building is generating $450 per month. So to get that into annual net income, I need to multiply that times 12, which gives me $5,400 annual net income. If I take my $5,400 and I divide it by my 12% cap rate, I come up with a value or purchase price of $45,000. If the gross annual income from a property is $112,000 and the total expenses for the year are $53,700, What capitalization rate was used to obtain a valuation of $542,325? So I'm looking for my cap rate. I know the value of the building is $542,325. My value is related to my annual net income. I've got gross income of $112,000, but I've also got expenses. So to get to my annual net income, I need to subtract out those expenses of $53,700. If I subtract out those expenses of $53,700 from $112,000, I get $58,300 in annual net income. So now I just need to divide the annual net income of $58,300 by $542,325, and I get a capitalization rate of 0.1075 or 10.75%. An appraiser has estimated the annual net income from a commercial building to be $142,700. When capitalized at a rate of 10.5%, the estimated value is. So I'm looking for the value. I've got a cap rate of 10.5% or 0.105, and I've got an annual net income of $142,700. I divide the $142,700 by 0.105 and get a value of $1,359,047.